I've decided to make my own version of the 1991 game Skifree. In this game you can ski down a hill, you need to avoid to hit trees and rocks, and you can make jumps on ramps. And then there are the threat of a snow monster chasing you down and eating you. I decided to make a version using these elements, but changing some things. The first thing that I have changed is that I will have the skier going upwards on the screen instead of downward as in the original game. Well, in both cases it is the background that moves, but the perceived direction of movement is in my case upwards and in the original game downwards. I choose the direction based on that we now see the action from the skier's point of view. This makes the controls more intuitive in my opinion. The background is just a white, non-moving image. The trees, rocks and ramps are sprites that move from the top of the screen to the bottom. The skier's position on the screen is fixed. He has a couple of sprites for turning, stopping, for starting up from standstill, and for going extra fast straight down. The changes in the position in the world that the skier would have done are transformed to relative movements of the trees, rocks and ramps moving in the opposite direction. This gives the illusion of the skier moving down the slope, followed by a moving camera. The landscape is generated using random positioning of the tree elements used. I have an array that holds different objects. Each object has different attributes for type of sprite and the position as X and Y. At the start of a run, the objects are randomly placed over the screen, but no lower than at 260 pixels. This is to make sure that nothing is placed at the same position as the skier, and that the skier has a fair chance to get started without hitting something. When an object has moved down below the lower edge of the screen, it is recycled, placed above the top edge of the screen, randomly assigned a value for type of object, and position in the X direction and the Y direction. The span of the X direction covers the length of the screen, and then again a fair bit on each side. The extra part helps to have landscape's elements if the skier starts to move far to one side. With this we have a never-ending landscape that will be different for each run. An extra touch is that I make the elements change size as they move in the Y direction. This gives a bit of an illusion of the elements appearing larger as they get closer, giving this somewhat of a 3D feeling. By no means perfectly, but it still adds something to the game, I think. Another thing is that the depth placement in the render order is changed for each item depending on position in the Y direction. This makes sure that an item closer to the viewer is rendered on top of an item further away from the viewer. The exception is the ramps that always will be at the bottom of the render order. Things will always be on top of the ramp if they are intersecting. The position of each sprite is measured from a point at the feet of each sprite, and it is also the center for a hitbox that is used to determine if the skier collide with any of the objects. In this aspect too, the ramps are different. There the hitbox is centered on the middle of the sprite. A collision between the skier and a rock or a tree means that the skier falls, and a collision between the skier and a ramp means he makes a jump. So there are sprites for the skier falling and for the skier jumping. The final element for the game is the snow monster. It might seem like there is a lot of them, but it is actually the same monster rotated over and over. The monster's position is affected by the skier's movements, the same as the trees and the other stuff. The monster has an additional movement in the X and Y direction towards the fixed point on the screen, that is where the skier is at. So these two movements together makes up the movement on the screen for the monster. The monster also have collisions with trees and rocks, and that keep the monster from moving forward in that direction. I have a minimal number of frames for the monster walk, 2 frames in each direction. When the monster catches the skier, it eats the skier. And that is what happened in the 1991 version of the game as well. This is where I have a lot of frames for a movement. They are monster sprites that includes the image of the skier. The skier object is made not visible during the eating sequence. The 2 sound effects are triggered by certain frames playing. And that is how I made this remake of the 1998 Skifree game. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you later.